Alright, this is chapter 18, Mastering Solidworks Using a Library Assembly Features in a Whole Wizard, probably part 1. I might have to cut it in two part tapes. Libraries help you to make more efficient use of the data where used frequently. Some of the features can be made with very flexible. You can apply them with a wide range of situations. Some of the libraries for the whole wizards are pre-made with can be combined with the automation to create tools like smart components with the library parts. You can use the library features resize as necessary. Shared libraries and multi-user environment require additional setup include Windows permission setting and a SolidWorks file location setting. In this chapter, you will learn to use library features, create library features, whole wizards, create assembly features, use envelopes, use smart components. Use library features intended with a parametrically flex to fit any of the many types of geometry, but they can also be the fixed shape. Within this chapter, you will use the information you have to learn with the previous chapter about design chain with the design intent that you will learn with how to create use of the store related library features. Library features reside in design library, which is located with the task pane right over the graphics window. Tip: you detach the task pane from the docking location, move it where you want it, leave it undocked, move it into a second monitor. One of the very useful features of the library is so that they can define and driven by configuration design table feature. In this part of the configuration is still available, so you can change configuration of an applied library feature at any time. You can also link library feature to an external file that enables you to change a feature or feature several parts at once if they are externally linked to the file. Getting started with the library features. Library features are simple to use and only slightly less simple to set up. For this reason, I will discuss using them first. You know the kind of behavior you're trying to create when you go to make a library, your own features. To use a library feature, drag with the drop for the design library on the appropriate geometry. You will be prompted to select reference for the new part to match with the base geometry to which the library feature is attached. It can be fairly creative with the reference, but one of the goals of creating the feature is make it work with a few references as possible. Few references make the feature as easy and fast and reliable to use. SolidWorks software installs several sample of library features in the design library. Following demonstrates you some of the standard library features later, but you can add a library result with a download file of the design library. Applying a library feature interface. Library features work with the best if you go with a certain type of the base geometry, similar type of the base geometry. For example, rectangular to rectangular, circular to circular. This area covers the relation of the dimension linked to the feature of the result. The rest in the part tend to the dimension from the straight edge of the concentric circular relation, of course, and other ways to apply with the library feature, but these are most prevalent. With the library features can be applied unconstrained and then constrained or moved from later from the process cleanest but the process is cleanest when it all falls together correctly the first time. Using a task pane. You don't have to save part of anything of the special before applying the library feature. You simply need to define the task pane. Task pane is the window that flies out with the right when you use open SolidWorks. You might have turned it off or forgotten about it, in which case you can turn it on choosing view and task pane in the menu. Task pane automatically closes with a click outside of it unless you pin it and it's open using the push pin icon upper right hand corner window. When you do this, the toolbars will appear with the right side of the task pane control with the removed with the out position between graphic window and task pane, which now remains open by default, which can also detach task pane by dragging bar over the top of the pane. Figure 18.1 shows the task pane docked at the right side of the SolidWorks window. Alright, it shows a book of books. Using the design library. Design library tab displays an image stack of books. The overall library area of all the four elements in SolidWorks. The part of the design library is to be concerned with now is the feature folder. The folder you can see with it populated with some of the sample features. Alright, the task pane is docked on the right side of the SolidWorks window. We're looking at design library. Typically sheet metal. One new part created cylinder you with any of the method you want. For example, the screw with the revolve with making the diameter 3-inch length with more than 1 inch with an expand with the feature for the into the subfolder. Select O-ring grooves. First feature of this called with the face static gas. Drag drop down the feature of the end flat face of the cylinder. Next step of the select with the configuration shown figure 18.2 with the library feature for the multiple size configuration. Configuration cases are driven by the design table select. Configuration 330. When you select the configuration interface chamber, in this case, the only selection sketch relation with the allowed case of the feature but not located with the dimension. Note of the reference panel, there is an edge entry with the question marks become with the check marks after the selected edge. This means the library feature from these with the circular edge located in the small window appears, displaying the library feature. You need to select an edge and that has similar relation to the library with the feature of the highlighted edge. Pick the circular edge on the part of the end of the cylinder where you want to place the library feature. Create a new part with a rectangular 1.5 inch by 2 inch and extrude it about 2 inches depth in the design length. Library, put the feature and then an inch, and then fluid power ports folder shown drag. Association American Engineers 1926-1 feature onto the end of the extruded rectangular section. Select size 38 to 24 side with the configuration list window appears prompts. Use the reference selection as shown figure 18.3. 18.2 show the placing feature selection configuration, face static gas in your design library, placement plane configuration link and size dimensions. Placing a library feature on the dimension. Now we have the library feature, place plane face, and then configurations, locating edges, name, location, dimensions, and size dimensions, and show the picture on the right in the panel. After locating the edge to have the identified located dimension have become active, you can change the value of the dimension and locate the feature further in size, dimension pane. Bottom property manager selecting override dimension values option enables you to change the dimension of the feature itself. When you use the library feature for the design table is not brought into the part of the library feature. It's already with the design table that would call it the multiple tables, which are not currently possible with the Solidworks configuration and the design table that are brought forward. And however, with an overriding feature dimension using override dimension values option in the size dimension panel of the library feature property manager. When feature configurations already exist, the new configuration called for the custom configuration will be created in the list of feature configurations that appear with the multiple configurations not allowed, so that you must make changes. You must ensure that they were the right before you use the sim library feature in this part. Exploring other design library functions. The design library has other functions besides the library feature. For example, if you can use it with a repository, other items you use frequently. Storing annotations. You can store commonly use the annotation design library. If you look at the annotation folder with the default sample annotations, you can use the combination symbol and blocks. You can use the symbols and notes of 3D models. You can use the blocks since only sketches or 2D drawings. Keep in mind that not all annotation types can be used in all places. Annotation can be stored in the library favorite blocks. Many file extensions are used with the different types of favorites, with typically between the solid and of the FVT as in solid welded favorite. Figure 18.4 show the default location design label of the thumbnail view of the favorites of models for the annotation folder. Shows the annotation folder Windows Explorer. We've done the design label. We went to annotations. It shows composites, positions, welding symbols, pneumatic valves. Alright, location of the design library folder. Frequently work with different type of the annotation should be organized library into the subfolder. The separate symbol of the annotation of the block will move these folders with a different location by default. The design library folders are found in C program data Solidworks 2018 design library. You should store with another location. You should store them in another location, not in the Solidworks installation directory, but in an area that you selected to maintain Solidworks data between release. For example, I would have a folder of the D library that contains folders for macro templates, library feature, library parts, favorites, and so on. You can easily back up the copy of the file with one computer to another, although you must quit Solidworks before making these changes. Keep it tab of the operating system driven is a good idea. If ever have to reinstall the OS, you won't lose your Solidworks library data. After moving the library, we must point SolidWorks into a new location. To do this, choose the Tools option, File Location, Design Library. Access through the Add File Location icon on the library pane. Through the old location browser, the new location. Use the start to move with other items listed to redirect any items that you use, such as templates, any other items used frequently. After using specified settings, they should be retained when you install the service package, upgrades, or further versions. Tip: you can add many shortcuts to the folder and the design library as you want. Just add the file and location icon on the top of the task pane. There's no need to go through the options. Storing library parts. Design library can also store commonly used library parts. One of the advantages of the library part is the placement of the library part into the assembly configurations that are available in the part. Windows pop up enabling you to select the configuration and play with it into the assembly. Figure 18.5 show the configuration selection window, library parts. Note the configuration are listed alphabetically. You can type the box to go in the configuration you want. Figure 18.5 shows selecting a library part configuration. Part inserted with the library part folder that can also take advantage of the mate reference functionality. Same with a toolbox allowing parts to snap into place using sheet metal forming tools. I only mention sheet metal forming tools here on this part of the library list because of much of the same in the other library features, but I do so within specialized functions. Sheet metal parts and Solidworks. I discuss sheet metal forming tools, chapter 35, creating sheet metal drawings, forming tools, folders, and have special feature that if you want to use the part and folder forming tools, you must right click on the folder, design library, choosing formatting tool folder. The only option library type that needs special folder is one of the library assemblies. Using assemblies, you can use the library assembly SolidWorks same way as you can use the library because they are inserted with the top level assembly as a sub-assembly. For sub-assemblies required with the motion universal joint assemblies, you can set a sub-assembly to solve a flexible or simple to dissolve the sub-assembly into an upper level assembly. Tip: when saving assemblies to the library, I recommend that you put the parts in a separate folder, segregate the parts for the different assemblies. Routing, SolidWorks routing, electrically purchased as add-in included with the SolidWorks Office Premium. It includes piping, tubing, rigid flexibility, and wiring. Routing makes extensive use of the library. Automation isn't part of the scope of this book. Using smart components. Smart components are components that you resize they automatically select the configuration depending on the side of the geometry which they have dropped. To do this, form the design table to select the interface that you set up to enable the automatically select part configurations based on mating part size. For example, the clamp with any of the side of the driven configuration when selected with the current configuration when it drops on the different sides of the cylinder. Smart components are covered throughout the later of the chapter. Creating a library feature. When saving the library feature for the library, the file extension is a solid LF feature, solid library feature part. This must contain some of the geometry simulates the parts only which feature will drop base geometry transfer the new part. Only features that are marked with an L for library and the feature manager are transferred to the new part. With the figure 18.6 show the feature manager library feature part. Alright, so now we've went to the feature manager library. We're in the library and we've picked on the base extrude. Creating a library feature. Create the library feature for the first problem that you need to solve with how to feature will locate with a new part. Does it need to be placed in the cylindrical parts or the rectangular part for the other type of shape? It doesn't matter at all. Will the feature be located even the dimensions, sketch relations? Will it be placed undefined later, fully defined manual rather than automatically? You may have noticed in one of the earlier examples, the sample fluid power ports had two versions of the same feature. For the one version 10 with the feature to be placed on the flat end of the cylinder. Other version 10 with the feature to be placed on the rectangular face. Understanding library limitations. Library features can maintain multiple features of the different type of the when added or remove the material with a single library feature. However, the few limitations exist. For example, require the base feature that external references are not allowed, nor are surfaces sheet with metal, weldments, or molds related to the feature of the addition. You cannot add scale feature, a feature that affects the entire body to the library. Can you apply the library to the assembly? Creating a new library feature. For example, I use a rectangular base for the library feature I wanted to create with a consist of the two boss extrudes, a cut extrude, and several fillets. First, you need to create with a rectangular extrude, but the size should be bigger than the feature that goes on it. The representative of the face and end part of the one to which the feature will be typically placed. Next, creating the feature for that you want to reuse with the mounting passing attempt to the reference for the outside of the sketch. This includes absolutely anything outside of the active of the sketch, such for the sketch, plane reference to edge, origin, other plane with the other sketches and axis. For each reference for anything that isn't already part of the library feature must be reconnected when you place it in the feature for the new part. But the ideal situation is for the signal drag and drop. Generally, with speaking, at least one of the other steps they usually need with the initial drag and drop determines starting phase for the feature. From here, they usually need to locate the features either by using the relation of the dimension, concentric relation, location of the feature for the single reference selection of the circular edge, although also need to be rotated. The dimension typically requires the dimension X dimension and another one in the Y dimension. Figure 18 shows the basement feature for the first feature for the library feature for the only relation between sketch library feature for the base feature for the sketch plane with the two dimensions. Creating a library feature, show the origin, mounting, base, boss, sketch. You should ensure the subsequent feature for the add to the one reference for the first feature for the library feature for the which for the second feature in part. This is not mandatory. Require that the helpful guidelines make additional references to the should be not limited to the same item, but already referenced if it is possible. Using the model carelessly do not pay attention. Users who model carelessly do not pay attention to what they're typically doing. Trouble in the library, making library features that function and are easy to use. Successful modeling library features are like planning a strategy in a game of chess. Now you can add the second extruded feature with being careful to reference for only the geometry of the going move of the library feature. Figure 18.8 show the newly added feature of the file with along with the detail of the feature is built. Open the part with the download materials under the file known chapter 18 first library feature solid favorite part. Notice that library favorite part, solid library feature part. Notice that the plane has been added. Plane is made with the reference for the only geometry for the internal library feature for the perpendicular to an edge of the midpoint. Simultaneously locates, orientates, place correctly to enable the use to be the mirror and the ear feature. Notice also new the ear sketch. They use the same reference face reference from the base feature. This will appear in the reference list with a single reference. Alright, so we're adding the next feature in the library feature. Saving the library feature. You can use the three methods for the save the library feature. You can either drag and drop of the design library folder or use the save as method button. Use the add to the library button in the task pane because save as is a little bit more common. I will describe it first. First step of the save of the library feature, select the feature for the feature main of the intended part of the library feature, collab with the feature for the first, do the sketch with the belong with their features aren't selected, the sketches are selected, you may get a warning message saying that no selected feature can be used with the library feature, do not worry, the sketch itself will be included. Remember that you can control select individual feature, shift select range, click and drag with the selection by the feature menu, solve like multiple features. Keep it in mind that you do not select a feature for the other than the base feature for that it won't be placed in part the insert of the library feature if there any relation omitted to the feature that may be displayed with the error of the warning and the place for the feature. Feature select with the click file, save as, and in file type drop down list, select with the solid LFP file type. Browse the design library fold, save the part in figure 8.9, show the feature manager, finished library feature. Finished library feature, show the design library feature, inches, bosses. Change the display of the library feature thumbnail. During the save as profit number called the button, a new folder called bosses where it was added to the design library as shown in figure 18.9. Notice new icon library feature for the lower window. You may notice that some of the default library features save with the design library with a bluish background shown in figure 18.10. The curve because of the Solidworks viewport background, which can be set by choosing the tools option colors, even if never see the colors because you have gradient background seen. Solidworks still use the color specified with the setting of the background, save with the thumbnails and previews. I always set the color to white, so the document backgrounds preview but do not have the blue color. May want to orientate zoom in the library feature before saving the display with the clearance of the panel. I would like to make base features different color from the library feature itself. This technique helps me to more easily determine the geometry that will be transferred. That what is the just the material that you can fill out with a description field with the library feature, which mouse pops up when the cursor hovers over the icon. The real test of the library feature comes with the actual use of the feature is recreated directly on a new part of the. But I have noticed one problem. The feature was placed. I was in 90 degrees away with the orientation I wanted to be in. I see it seems like the only way to make the feature rotatable with a parallel perpendicular relation rather than horizontal vertical ones. So one of the references can act as a rotation reference. Figure 18.11 shows the completed library feature placed on one part. 18.10 shows displays the model of the design library. And it shows small icons in the folders. After you place the library feature part, you can edit the use of the selected link for the library part of the configuration pane with the feature driven externally from the solid library feature part. With the library link to the library part option is available only when the feature is first placed and is available when editing existing library feature in the part. Although the dissolve library feature option will break the link, the option also causes all consistent features to become regular features in the main part. Doing this figure library feature destroy the configurations. Our completed library featured on parts made. So now we went to the part manager, property manager, library feature, placement plane, configuration references, location, dimension, sizes, and over here it showed the library boss 1. Creating a library feature for an existing part. When creating a library feature for the existing part, essentially with the chain profit, the button, someone with the difference, if they achieve the correct result, it best to remove all the feature for the zoning, either they have the form of the base feature for the going for the library feature for the top. This can make the broker with the reference by being this from the work from the shape of the copy of the original part, with the most parts aren't modeled by the creating a library feature in mind. Creating library features were effective the reference I mentioned earlier, and like a chess match, they require some forethought. It might be better to use different techniques such as creating a new part and only with a base feature you can then control drag the desired feature from the existing part with the new part, setting up the rest of the library feature, saving it with a solid library feature part extension. You can also create library feature for the dragging dropping, although some of the limitation techniques seem the overall convenience. However, there is a workaround. Biggest limitation: if you select feature for the dragging into the lower design library window to add library property manager interface will appear with enable you to start creating a library feature. To add a library property manager interface shown in figure 1812, select the feature for the flyout feature manager. This is the source of one of the limitations. Example of the place cannot be selected without this method. The workaround for this for the complete feature without playing, right click with the icon design library window and select the open with library feature open in this window. Right click with the plain feature, select the add library individual features added. In addition, add to the library option. There's also an option remove the library from any selected features currently part of the library feature. Ordinarily, you wouldn't see both options in the right menu menu at this mouse button. At the same time, I forced the issue of the controlling select both library and non-library features before right clicking. 1812 shows right menu mouse button add to library, remove the library. Adding folders to the library. Can add folders to the library in 3 ways. Right-click and design library window, select with a new folder using the Window Explorer interface by using the Add File Location button on the top of the taskbar. Another right mouse button menu option with adding existing folder, which enables you to add folder with another location in the library. The folder is not moved with the copy. The shortcut is add with the design label. The contents appear in the lower pane. Tip: after the library feature of the editor of the folder with the document tab and the nav of the library, use the Window Explorer, press F5 with either lower and upper window to update with the display for the window with the refresh icon located at the top of the task pane. Locating dimension, internal dimension. You create with the library feature Solidworks has the 2 folder feature, main with the reference folder, the dimension folder, the term of the dimension folder that has 2 folders. Locating dimension, internal dimensions. All these folders shown in figure 1813. Reference folders show and use place to reference for the library feature for the error feature for the prompt to select with the opening upon placement of the library feature for the new part with no additional work on the part is required for the folder of the dimension folder, the list of the dimension library features. Some of these dimensions are used to locate the feature of the dummy block. Some of them meant to decide the feature itself with making library feature recommended a separate locating feature for the internal feature for the dragging dimension and separate folder the locating of the dimension can be changed while placing the library feature for the internal dimension cannot be accessed. You want the limited user of the access for some of the dimensions standing with the tooling with the library feature while you're creating to be also aware that the interfacing move the dimension folders is not allowed with more than one dimension to move at one time. Figure 1813 show the reference locating dimension, internal dimension, and library feature. So we have locating dimension, internal dimensions, creating assembly cuts. Several types of designs require various cuts to be made with the product. Assembled, for example, the plates may be clamped or then drilled to make sure the holes line up with the perfectly cast parts may be assembled and given them with the final grinding cut with the remove of the cuts reserved for the finish. Some assembly cuts can be also created with visually using the section view. If you do need the physical cut with the finished assembly, you should look at the using section, which will cost you less rebuild time, cause future complications. Except the cut feature that make the assembly cut, you can use the assembly feature toolbar icon assembly with the command manager. Choose the insert of the assembly feature for the cut into extrude. Because of the removing the material with the assembly of the most commonly used the techniques I will discuss and first of the additive the process existing such as welding and techniques such as additives and putty fillers, and that will be discussed later in this chapter. Solidworks will have only certain types of features be used in assembly cuts. Extruded cuts, revolve cuts, sweep cuts, and hole feature. For this example, you cannot use a loft cut with the assembly feature, but you can use the loft solid and a cavity feature, and then contact with the feature for the non-assembly with the feature that you can also do with the loft, the cut with the combined solid with a single part of the split, the part in multiple bodies, and then split the multiple parts, as was discussed in chapter 33, employing master model techniques. SolidWorks provides many ways that must be do almost anything you can imagine in your job to determine which move that you with the most flexibility costs you the least each time to give the more accurate results. When you set up with the assembly cut, you do have the same result with the wood setup with the cut and the part environment, with a couple of exemptions. The first sketch for the assembly plane rather than part face of the plane that belongs to the part that this is not required, just a practice suggestion. Second, you must use the first scope of the SolidWorks if you want to cut through all of the possible components that you selected components. Further, you can use SolidWorks automatically select parts for you. For the most, able to resolve the probably best with manually select the parts that you want to cut. Sometimes assembly cuts are created with the documentation purposes rather than design purposes. For example, if you want to cut a model section of the display with the isometric view or an exploded section view, you must do so using assembly cut, probably with a conjunction with the configuration. You can use to show the assembly without this section. For example, 1814 shows an isometric cutaway with the created with the assembly feature in the cut and extrude. When you place the feature in assembly like this, cuts exist only with the context of the assembly. If opened with the individual part with the own window, the part isn't cut with the open with the part in another assembly. Part isn't cut there either. The cut exists only with the assembly in which it was made. Figure 18 shows the property manager for the cut with the cut extrude feature for the displayed and feature manager for the assembly after the mate folder local patterns and even after the assembly sketch. Using feature scope. Using axis feature scope of the property manager in the example of the parts will cut with the cut when entire assembly. In reality, some of the parts may not have the need to be cut, but in this case, you have taken longer to find them than just the cut. All parts you partially with the cuts assembled with a couple of different ways. One way is to orient the feature that you can control the depth of the cut with a sketch within sketch with the suit that you needed. Another way is either blind cut depth to control the depth. Finally, of course, you can use the feature scope to avoid cutting certain parts. Preparing feature parts. Propagating feature parts. One of the most common SolidWorks mistakes users make is matching assembly with what they mean. Assembly when they mean to sketch an part in order to create the feature. In this part, for example, they may not pay attention to what you're doing. They may forget to click the edit part button before starting a sketch. In addition to the common mistake, sometimes feature with assembly easy to resolve with the assembly level, especially if they are affected with multiple parts. Feature scope of the panel with the assembly feature for the cut extrude. The property manager contains the option with the propagated feature for the parts. You control the sketch and the assembly create with the assembly feature for the select with the propagated feature for the parts only. Make sure that the correct parts select the feature scope of the selection box. If clicking the green checkmark icon, SolidWorks propagate with the sketch for the feature each of the selected feature scope parts of the sketch for the feature resides in the feature manager for the individual part. Similarly, feature cut through a feature scope is shown in figure 1815. Show the cut extrude from the sketch, the plane, direction, dimension, and slide to the law of directions. Selected contours, all components, selected components, propagated parts, and auto selection in the part list. Now let's look at the propagated feature of the parts option with the feature scope that's being able to do. When you do this assembly cell display with the cut extrude feature for the bottom of the assembly feature remain out. Each of the part included with the feature scope that also gets in context extruded feature for the do not. If you delete the assembly level feature, the feature will also be deleted from each of the individual parts. Although this is a nice shortcut, not something you should do on a regular basis. In particular, assembly could cause errors about with a dozen mates. The kind of functionality also exists when the assembly fills and chamfer the holes here with the functional hole wizard, where special hole locations in assembly of the holes holes show up with the feature of the individual parts. You can read more about the whole series in the feature layer in this chapter. Making fillets and chamfers and assemblies. After the assembly of the corners filled in with the same of the made machines around them. Figure 1816 shows a stack of plates that have been filleted and chamfered into the assembly. The book sometimes uses the more abstract part example to learn with the more of the limitation feature of the simplified geometry. The first thing you can learn with a particular example, the large fillet. Started one part that do not carry with the overflow of the others when you have the made a selection. The second thing to notice is when you're creating a fillet, they do not automatically propagate with the tangent and the other part of the fillet within part of the do. If you want to fill with a string of the edge of it, you have to select the edge individually. A third thing to notice is that you can use the assembly fillet to add the material as well as remove the material. Therefore, goes beyond the initial assembly fillets will be used for the filling, saving and machining sharp edge within the realm of the body with the fillet or putty. SolidWorks gives you capabilities that you may not have in the real world when your model end is in your own responsibility. In other words, pay attention to what you are doing. Notice that there's also have the option propagate the fillets and parts. Assembly fillets do not give the capabilities for the individual part fillets. You cannot create break setbacks, hold line curvature, continuous fillets in a way not everyone finds with the use of the feature, but it does not offer alternative to working around the option you have to rely on the past. using whole wizard, and then I'm gonna cut the tape there.